Shout out to this broski for this idea for the video. Enjoy. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. Today we are doing Tier List Thursday, and we have all the Pixar movies. Now, a little bit of a disclaimer before we begin. I saw a lot of these movies when they first came out, some in theaters, some later on. Then I actually just recently rewatched them a bunch of times because of my daughter. She loves the movies and they're on Disney Plus, and so we watch them all the time. So I've seen every single one of these at least in the last 2 months. Some more than others, but at the end of the day, I've seen them all. So I just want to say this right off the bat. There is no bad Pixar movie. There are some pretty rough ones. Overall, I don't think there is like an F tier Pixar movie, at least for me personally. If you feel that way, that's okay. But for me, I don't think there is an F tier. So you guys already know how a tier list works. How I do it is the furthest to the left and highest is the best. And I'll kind of go over that as I go through this list. So if you enjoy this video, please don't like, subscribe, turn notifications. If you want to think of an idea for next week's tier list, let me know in the comments below or in my Discord. And if I use your suggestion, I'll give you a shout out. So with that said, let us begin. So right off the bat, we're starting off with Toy Story 1. That's an instant classic, I just gotta say. It's instant S tier. I don't really think you can say that Toy Story 1 isn't good. I mean, of course, you can say like the special effects don't really hold up or the CGI. In my opinion, it's the first one. Without this movie, a lot of these other movies wouldn't exist. A lot of actually animation that we know wouldn't exist. And I think you have to be able to pay homage to not only that, but also because the movie itself and the characters and the story is actually very fun and intriguing and entertaining. And it was one of my favorite movies as a kid, and that's where it goes, right there. Next one, Up. So this is one of those ones that really gets some hate, like more hate than I personally think it deserves. And I'm gonna put Up at probably a B. Some people usually put this near the bottom, and I never really understood it. So I saw this in theaters when it first came out, and I watched it again today, and I still think it's just as funny. You know, it still holds up. The story itself is, you know, cartoony, but I think at the same time, it deals with a lot of real-time issues, while also just kind of entertaining itself and us. I like the dynamic of the two characters, and I think that, you know, both their pros and cons really do weigh out pretty well, especially near the end when things really get like cranked up to 10. Because the movie itself is pretty slow through most of it, and then like at the end, the action just ramps up out of nowhere. So I could see where people might complain about the pacing of this movie, but personally, I think it's pretty good. So I'm gonna put it at a B. I don't think it is one of the best, and I can't say it's really good. So I'm just gonna put it in the B section. It's just like good, you know, not bad, not great. It's good. All right, next one we have Cars 2. That's D tier. Everyone knows Cars 2 is the worst Pixar film. And the reason for that, in my opinion, is because you can tell it was made just to sell merchandise. They kind of forgot to make a story for it and thought to themselves, how do we sell more merchandise? I know, let's make a Cars 2, because the first one we sold a bunch of merchandise off of. Let's make a Cars 2, and instead of having a more heartwarming story like the first one, let's just throw that out and just make a random spy thriller with Mater. That sounds amazing. And yeah, technically the movie was really successful, not just because of how much, you know, people who want to go see it, but also the merchandise. They made a lot of money off of that. So technically, while it is considered a fail in terms of story and just movie overall, it's considered a success because it made a lot more money for the company anyways. So going off of a rating movie standard, I do not think it's awful. I do think there are some actual redeeming qualities to this film, but it is the worst out of all the Pixar films so far, in my opinion. It was back in the day when it first came out, and it's still now. And if you think it is good, I don't really see how you could think it's good. Not saying you're wrong, but I'm always right. So if I'm right and you're wrong, you're probably wrong. Okay, moving on to the next one, we have Brave. I think Brave is a C. I think it's all right. It's all right. I wouldn't really say it's good. I can't say it's bad. It's all right. The story itself is fine. And because of that, C tier. Next one, Monsters University. I actually kind of want to put this right behind Brave. I actually like the first Monsters more, and we'll get to that later on in this list. But I think Brave had a little more heart to it than Monsters University. So not only did it not have the heart of Brave, but it also didn't have the heart and the love put into it like Monsters Inc. Monsters Inc. was such an interesting, complex story. Really, I mean, yeah, sure, it's still simple. It's still technically a kid's movie, but it was pretty complex with the different type of dynamics they were tackling. For me, if Monsters University was the only one out of that franchise, I think it'd be pretty good. But I think it's because the first one is such a gem that the second one just kind of falls by the wayside for me. So that's why I have it there. Okay, next one we have Inside Out. Now I think this is actually the Spanish version of the title, Del Rivas. So, but it's Inside Out, you guys know it is. At one time, I'd probably put Inside Out right in front of Cars 2. When the movie first came out, it was definitely one of the worst in my opinion. However, upon rewatching it now as an adult with my own child, and, you know, kind of experiencing a lot of the different like emotions that, you know, little kids go through and parents have to, you know, go through raising these kids, honestly, I'm going to put it right behind Up. I still think Up is the better movie, but I think that the way that Inside Out has tackled emotions, in the past I used to think it was a terrible movie, but looking at it from like an overall, you know, span of a the different type of elements that it's tackling, it does a really good job. And I think for me, it goes right there in the B list. Okay, moving on to our next one, we have The Good Dinosaur. When I first saw this one, I actually really liked it, but rewatching it, I think it's fine. I'm probably gonna put it behind the Monsters University. I don't think it's a D tier. When I see other people's lists, this is always like right in front of Cars 2. And for me, I don't think it's terrible, but I think it's like not good either. It's okay. So it's gonna go in the C list. So that's where it's gonna go. Next one we have Finding Dory. Finding Dory is kind of the same way with Monsters University. It was still a decent film, but it lacks like the love and, you know, that extra, I don't know, that extra magic, I guess you could say, that goes into like some of the first Pixar films. Something about it just missed something, and it just doesn't really reach the Finding Nemo's prowess in my opinion. So for that reason, I'm gonna put this like right, maybe a little bit in front of Monsters University. I do think that Brave is a better film. While I do like the concept of Finding Dory more, overall Brave was, it had more love behind it, and overall, you can feel that. You can see it on screen, so it's gonna go right in front of that. So that's how I feel. Next one we have Cars 3. It is better than the second one, but it is still like, it's okay. I'm probably gonna put it right between Monsters University and The Good Dinosaur. It's fine. It's a cool little like passing of the torch story for Lightning McQueen. I know a buddy of mine when he was, well, he's a buddy of mine now, but back then he was just like my little annoying neighbor next door. He loved Lightning McQueen when the first one came out, and he kind of grew up with those films. Like Toy Story was kind of my films I grew up with. You know what I mean? I was kind of like Andy, I guess you could say. Yeah, he's about like 5 years younger than me. You know, Cars was his Toy Story, so those films kind of grew up with him, and, you know, the passing of time and stuff like that. I do appreciate they kind of tackled the idea that you're never gonna stay on top forever. Eventually there's going to be someone who's going to take your spot, and that's just the way it is. So you might as well just live life while you can and do the best you can while you still can do your best. So I think that's probably one of the best parts about that film. Overall though, it's still not very good, so it's gonna go right there in the C section. Next one, Coco. Coco was a surprise for me. When I saw the previews for this, I thought, this looks booty. This looks like crap. Boring, concept looks dumb, I'm not watching it. Well then, at some point, it was on Netflix when I first saw it, and me, my wife, my daughter, she was really tiny at the time, and we're like, let's just put it on, see if she likes it. Maybe it's just one of those dumb Pixar movies, nice and flashy, whatever. And I ended up actually really enjoying it. I like the way that they tackled death in this story. It's one of the more impressive / deepest things that Pixar has really ever tackled. You know, they've tackled mental illness before. If you want to look at it, Monsters Inc. was kind of like them tackling the Border Patrol in a way. And even Wall-E was tackling how you handle, like, you know, taking care of your Earth. And for me, I think they did a really good job. So I'm going to put this, I'll probably put a little bit in front of Brave. I don't think it's a good movie necessarily, but I do like it. I was surprised how much I like it. It's almost there. Okay, so you may have noticed from the list, I actually went through and I kind of changed the names on them. So they're no longer S through D. They're now amazing, great, good, okay, and booty. So pretty much amazing is amazing and booty is booty. So our next one is Bug's Life. For me, A Bug's Life was always one of my favorite Pixar movies growing up. In fact, there were times where I would actually put this maybe even above the first Toy Story, or maybe even the second Toy Story. But after kind of looking at them, it doesn't really hold up as well as it used to, but I still like the overall story that it's trying to tell. The idea that, you know, separate we are weak, but together we are strong. And yeah, it's a good movie. I cannot say great, but it's good. I'm gonna put it right in front of Up. I think it's a little better than Up, but that's that. Okay, next one is Incredibles 2. I actually just rewatched this one last night, and I think it's still very okay. I might put a little bit in front of Cars 3. It suffers from the same thing that I mentioned with Monster University and Dory and even Cars 3 and 2 to that point, to the fact that like the first film out of those franchises were just so good. And that's how I feel. The Incredibles 1 is just so much more better than Incredibles 2 that when you look at Incredibles 2, it just doesn't hold up. It just doesn't fit as well. It just doesn't work as well. And because of that, it's just an okay film. It's not really booty, like I'd say for Cars 2. And while I do feel like it tried, I do think that it kind of gets buried behind because Incredibles 1 was just that good. So, there you go. Next one, Toy Story 4. When I heard they're making Toy Story 4, I got kind of annoyed because I felt like Toy Story 3 was like the perfect cap to the story. But if they're gonna make one, I think they did a really good job with what they did. I still think that maybe it's the weakest out of the Toy Story movies, but I still think it's good. I'm gonna probably put it, I think I like Up a little bit more. The interesting thing about the Toy Story movies is that the first two were more about like the toy story, and the third and fourth one was more about the meaning behind the stories going on. And what I mean by that is like the first two are more about Woody and Buzz's adventures, and the third one, while there is the toys still being on an adventure, it was more about Andy saying goodbye, you know, letting go of his past and moving on, like we all have to. And Toy Story 4 was more about Woody realizing that his job was done and now it's time for him to move on. So I definitely think that Toy Story 3 and 4 have more, they're more deeper than the first two, but there's some of the first two are just so good. So Toy Story 4, still good, but I can't really put it in great or amazing. Next one, Onward. Honestly guys, Onward is booty for me. I only saw it once, so maybe I gotta give it more time. I felt like there were so many different things about the movie that could have been so cool, but they just dropped the ball. Like over and over again, the ball just kept getting dropped. And then in the end, they worked so hard to meet their dad, and the main character doesn't even meet his dad. And it's like, like I get why you did it. I understand the story element, and while it's really cool that the older brother got to, you know, I get that. But for me, the movie itself, it just doesn't hold up altogether. It's very okay-ish. Like, it's barely okay. And I just think, like, while it's not necessarily a cash grab like Cars 2, I don't think it's good or even okay. It's bad, at least for me. So it goes in the booty. And I just realized that in the beginning of this list, I said that there is no bad Pixar film. I should say there is no terrible Pixar films. There are bad ones. There's just no completely awful, terrible ones. And if there were, that would be Cars 2. Okay, now we're getting to Toy Story 2, guys. I gotta do amazing. I have loved that movie ever since I saw it in theaters. It was actually probably the very first Pixar movie I saw. And that was back in 1999. So I was like 5 or 6 back then. And I love it. Actually, it's better than the first one. So like I mentioned before, the first one was more about, you know, Buzz and Woody, you know, butting heads and then becoming friends, where this is more about Woody discovering himself. We kind of get more backstory on what he is and what type of toy he is and like all the extra information that goes behind that. And it makes him realize, like, what does he want to do? Does he want to stay, or does he want to become what he is supposed to be? And in the end, of course, he decides to not become what he's supposed to be, and he does what he wants to do. So I think that's not only a strong message to send to kids, but overall, it's a really fun and entertaining story, like, all the way through. Like, there is no point in this movie where we're just kind of like, oh, this is boring. Like, you're constantly just watching and being entertained. And overall, I always say this, the most important thing for a movie to be able to do is to be entertaining. And that's what Toy Story 2 does. So, that's why it's there. Next one, Monsters Incorporated, great. Not much more I have to say about that. Great movie. You guys already know it is. It's great. Next one, Finding Nemo, even greater. I would say that Finding Nemo is amazing. It's so good. I don't really have to explain it. You guys know it's good. The Incredibles, amazing. I would actually maybe put that one, I'd probably do like this. I might even put The Incredibles to the front. I mean, honestly, these four are like interchangeable in my mind. They're all just so good. So, yeah. Next one, Cars 1. I think that's good. I'd say it's probably, I like that one a little bit more than Up. So, yeah. Next one, Ratatouille. So this is one that people always say is one of their favorite, and I think it's okay. I used to really dislike it, but after rewatching it, I think it's all right. I'm probably gonna put it, yeah, I kind of like it a little more than Brave, but I don't like it as much as Coco. I just can't really get behind the story. I know, for you diehard Ratatouille fans, you're gonna hate me for that, but that's how I feel. And like I said, I'm always right, so that means that you guys have wrong opinions. So I guess that's just the way it is. Okay, moving on to the next one, WALL-E. I was always very entertained by WALL-E. I think the first time I saw it, I really liked it. The second time I saw it, I was kind of like, it's still good. But now rewatching it, I think it's fine. I'm probably gonna put a little bit in front of Coco. It's a very okay film. I can't really say it's good anymore, but it's definitely one of the best out of the okay films, in my opinion. And last but not least, Toy Story 3. Here's the thing about Toy Story 3. When I saw it first, I really thought it was like okay. But now rewatching it and to really truly understand what the characters are going through, not necessarily the toys, but more of what Andy's going through. And like I mentioned earlier in this video, I always kind of saw myself as Andy in these movies because, you know, when this movie came out, I was about Andy's age, and I kind of grew up with them. So for me, Toy Story 3 definitely grew on me when I started putting myself into Andy's shoes again, and him moving on and kind of just going to his next spot in his life. So personally, I think it's amazing. On some days, I'd put it in front of Toy Story 2, and some days, I'd put it behind Toy Story 1. But overall, I'm probably gonna put it maybe a little bit in front of Toy Story 1 for right now. Tomorrow it could change, but for right now, that's my list. So there you go, guys. That is my Pixar movies tier list. What is your list? Let me know in the comments below. Like I mentioned in the beginning of this video, if you'd like to see me do a specific tier list for next week, let me know in the comments below. And if I do your suggestion, I will give you a shout out. But that's it for now, guys. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you later. Peace.